All right, so those crazy Christians. We'll get to that here in a second. But first, I want to say welcome. If you are new here, it's your first time here, you are in the right place. And we have a lot of stuff going on today, and it's a pretty exciting time to be here at Chaparral. We're glad that you're here. We've been talking about baggage for the last few weeks. And it's our last week to see that really cute little video looking at baggage. And we've been looking at all the kind of stuff that we carry around. All those things that we just load on our shoulders and we carry around for so long that maybe we forget we even have it, or we just don't know what life would be like without having that baggage on our back. It might be baggage from some pain that we had in the past, or some frustration, or some failure, or some doubt or disappointment. But we got this stuff we keep carrying around and carrying around. We've been talking about ways that we can put it down and kind of let go of some of that baggage. But instead we hang on to it, that we are stubborn about it. We know what stubborn is like, right? There's a lot of folks I know that are probably stubborn in this very room, right? This year, thousands of men will die of stubbornness. No, we won't, right? We kind of get this stubborn idea. In fact, speaking of stubborn, I don't know if you know this, but there's a big baseball thing going on this weekend, right? Dodgers and D-backs. Well, I heard this yesterday. It's kind of crazy. They're coming back here for Game 3 in Arizona. So they're on the jet, the Dodgers were. They're flying back. And I heard the story that, the Dodgers were sitting in the economy section of an airline because they, couldn't afford to sit in better seats. And so Dodgers are there, and one of the Dodgers gets up and goes from economy and sits in first class. Just gets up and boop, goes and sits in first class. And the flight attendant's like, well, that can't be right. So she goes to them and she says, hey, sir, you got to go back to your seat in economy. He said, no, I can't. I don't have to. I'm a Dodger. I'm awesome. I'm going to Phoenix. I'm staying right here. Kind of stubborn. So she says, well, what am I going to do? And so she goes to the flight deck and she tells the co-pilot. He goes back and says, hey, sir, I'm sorry you can't be in first class. You need to go back to economy. He says, no, I'm a Dodger. I'm awesome. I'm going to Phoenix. I'm staying right here. Oh, man, So he goes back to the flight deck and he goes to the captain. He says, I'm going to call the police when we land in Phoenix because this guy just won't go back to his seat. He's like, wait, you said he's a Dodger, right? He's like, yeah. He says, you know what? I lived in L.A. for a few years. I speak Californian. Let me go and talk to this guy. So the captain gets up, goes back, whispers in the ear of this Dodger. And all of a sudden, Dodger goes, oh, whoa, man, I am so sorry. I'm sorry. He gets up and he goes and sits down in his seat. And the flight attendant and the co-pilot are like, what did you say to him that got him to get up and leave so easily? He says, well, I went to him and I told him. I said, you know what? First class isn't going to Phoenix. Right? We can be stubborn sometimes, right? Now, what is the quintessential example of being stubborn? Well, there's a book about it. It's a book about being stubborn. Most of you know the story, not the name of the person, though. Who's a big fan of Dr. Seuss? Raise your hand. You're a big fan of Dr. Seuss. Okay, a few of you are. What is the most popular story of Dr. Seuss? No, Green Eggs and Ham. Come on, Green Eggs and Ham, right? It's a story of being stubborn. You got this one guy who just does not want green eggs and ham for whatever reason. We don't know why. Maybe he prefers bacon over ham, doesn't like the color green. Maybe he tried something a long time ago that was new and it got him sick, so he doesn't want to try anything else new ever again. We don't know why he doesn't like green eggs and ham. He just doesn't like them. He's got a friend, though, whose name is Sam I Am. And Sam I Am wants to get him to try green eggs and ham. And when he does, Mr. Stubborn, this guy over here, Mr. Stubborn says, I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam I Am. Now, does Sam I Am give up on Mr. Stubborn? No, he's not like, oh, well, I guess I won't even try then. I guess he doesn't like green eggs and ham. No, he doesn't. He doesn't give up. So he's as stubborn as the other guy. He says, try them, and you may. Try them, and you may, I say. Now, does any of you in this room have a friend, maybe sitting next to you, who is your Sam I Am? Raise your hand. No, I won't say that. Raise your hand. Yeah. Well, especially like at a restaurant. You go to a restaurant and they go, oh, try this. And you're like, no, I don't want to. Try this. Stacy, my wife, is my Sam I Am. Okay, she's Stacy she be. That kind of stuff. We've been married for 27 years. Great years. I did the math. That's like 30,000 meals we've shared together. In that time, I still do not like Brussels sprouts. I do not like asparagus. I do not like olives. But to this day, we go to a restaurant, what does she say? Oh, try my Brussels sprouts. No. It's been 30,000 meals with you. The answer will always be no. It's like we have people that, but again, it's not bad intentions. They want you to try something that they enjoy. But the problem is, I don't want to try them. I have never tasted a Brussels sprout. Don't want to. So here's the thing. We have people in our lives that, again, well-intentioned, but want us to try new things. And we're like, no, we're kind of stubborn about it. Well, Sam I Am isn't giving up, and Mr. Stubborn isn't giving up, right? He says, I will not eat them in a house. I will not eat them with a mouse. I will not eat them in a box. I will not eat them with a fox. I will not eat them here. I will not eat them there. I will not eat them. Good, you guys know this story. Okay. Unfortunately, here's the problem. Unfortunately, Mr. Stubborn's attitude is the attitude that a lot of people have about church today. That's the hard part about this. Like, I'm not going to try it. I won't like it. I feel burned out or bummed out. I'm ticked off or I feel ripped off. I'm disillusioned, disappointed. I just don't want to try it. And they don't. And that's the hard part about this. Because sometimes they don't even really know what they're not trying. Because they've got this negative perception about who we are or what the church is. Now, you are probably well aware that in the United States today, in the U.S., there's a growing negative perception about the church, about Christians. It's been around for a while. In fact, a few years ago, I talked to you about that, and we gave some statistics about that. But it's around. It's happening in our world. In fact, I see this a lot in my profession when I get my hair cut. So you go to get your hair cut, right? You sit down in the chair, they put that little apron on you, and they start, how about your haircut? How's the D-backs doing? Oh, you watching the game tonight? That kind of stuff. And then they come to that one big question. So what do you do for a living? Nice conversation. Been talking for about 10 minutes. I've tried two things recently. If I say, which is true, I run a CrossFit gym in town. Oh, really? I got a friend who does CrossFit. Yeah, I've seen it on TV. Yeah, do you like doing it? Just conversation goes on. If I say, I'm a minister down the street, right? Dead silence. This happens again and again and again because there's this kind of negative perception about the church. And so we're going to talk about that today because the religious landscape in America has been changing for decades. It has been. There's a time when the church was kind of a magnet, that everybody kind of went to church. Right? You got up on Sunday, what'd you do? You went to church. Everyone liked green eggs and ham in those days. And there was green eggs and ham restaurants on every street corner in town. But that's begun to change. In fact, there's some statistics that say that the fastest growing religious group in America today are the nuns. Not nuns as an N-U-N with the black and white habits, but this kind of nun. The people that say on a form, what is your religious preference? They put none. This is the fastest growing group in America. There's a subset group of the nuns called the duns. The people that were in the church and then left. And we know these folks. This may have been you. May be you. Or maybe you know people at work like this or at the gym like this that are just done. They feel betrayed at some point or abandoned, or they had some really bad experience at some point in their life, or they prayed to God for something and it didn't work out and they kind of blame God for it. But whatever reason, there's some pain or some hurt or something going on in their life where they've said to themselves, I'm kind of done. And so we look at the situation in America and we've got some choices to make. I mean, yeah, we can say there's this cultural shift. We can blame it on technology. We can blame it on the postmodern mentality. We can blame it on all these kind of things, but that's going to do us no good. Right? We can't control technology. We can't control postmodernity. We can't control those things. And we can sit there and complain about it and shake our heads and go, I remember back in the good old days when everyone liked green eggs and ham. Remember those days? Remember those days when things were good? That's not going to change the situation. But what we can deal with, where we can start, is with us. Look at ourselves and say, has the church become irrelevant? And is it our fault? And begin to make corrections there. What role does the church play? Probably the number one reason that we run into nones and dones today is this perceived incongruity, this difference between how they see Jesus and how they see his followers. They've done surveys, and they've asked people outside the church, how do you see Jesus? And they use words like loving, fair, kind, engaging, sacrificial, patient, unselfish, and compassionate. But then they ask, how do you see Christians, his followers? And they use words like judgmental, cliquish, isolated from the real world, grumpy, weird, and they only talk about money. That's how we're perceived. So that's kind of the baggage that we carry, or has been put on us. And there's one more word they use a lot, hypocritical. Hypocritical. So this song by Brad Paisley kind of fits a little bit, right? Those crazy Christians, dressed up, driving down my street, get their weekly dose of guilt before they head to Applebee's. They pray before they eat, they pray before they snore, they pray before a football game, and every time they score. A famous TV preacher has a big affair, and then, when tearful confession, he's born again and again. It's like they can't wait to forgive someone for just about anything, those crazy Christians. I mean, so he's kind of right about that. It's kind of people begin to have these caricatures of us that they see us as hypocrites sometimes. But I want to encourage you with this. If that's you today, that you see it like that, or you know folks who see it like that you're not alone. Maybe it's kind of ironic and encouraging that this is not a new problem, that Jesus dealt with this exact problem himself. In fact, you may not know this, but the first person to use the word hypocrite in the Bible is Jesus. He's the only person in the Bible to use the word hypocrite. The word hypocrite is a Greek word. Actually, it's a Greek word that we've kind of converted in English that means actor. What's an actor? Actor is someone who puts on a face, someone who is intentionally fake. They put on this fake persona to be somebody else and hide who they are on the inside. And in Jewish culture, in those days, it was really bad to be an actor. They weren't seen as great people, but they were seen as fakes in the Jewish world. There was a saying that it said, cursed is anyone whose shadow falls on a theater. Because they were seen as these fake people. So Jesus has some harsh words. So being a religious hypocrite, a religious actor, was a big deal for Jesus. And they received his most strict criticism, especially if you were a religious leader. And we're going to talk about two of these groups today. Jesus is going to confront. One, he calls scribes. And these were like the ordained clergy. These were the people with the diploma on the wall, the ones who kind of help write the laws, that kind of folk. The other folks he talks about are the Pharisees. Now, these weren't the ordained people, but they were super pious. And they wanted to follow every one of the 613 Jewish laws, kept them all, and wanted everybody else to do the same. And they said to protect the laws, we've got to build laws around the laws. So if the law was don't work, they put a fence around that law. And the idea was, if I'm not going to break this law, if I don't get close to it, I won't break it. So if I put a law out here, a rule out here that says, don't go that far, I won't break this one. Does that make sense? Right? So if you don't want the kid to touch the stove, don't go in the kitchen. You won't touch the stove. It's kind of that mentality. But the problem was that created a barrier between them and God. Because people went to the fence and not to God. They went just to that rule. And those rules became a problem. We even see it today. If you've ever been to Israel, on Sabbath, their elevators change. Because to avoid the law of working on the Sabbath, they have all the elevators stop at every floor. Because pushing the button could be considered work. So you go in the elevator, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. When I was in Israel, I found that frustrating, so I took the stairs, which was more work. But you get the idea, though, right? I mean, you begin putting these rules in place, and they become frustrating and they become a burden. Jesus cared about that because he wanted them to go past the rules, to have a relationship with God, to know our hearts, not this outward facade of rule keeping. Now, we're going to read a long text here from Jesus today, kind of an extended text. And I want you to know that this isn't just a criticism of the religious leaders in Jesus' day. It's not. I think this text is here as a warning to us because our masks are not their masks. We have different masks that we wear sometimes. And you know what your masks are, the persona you put to the world. Jesus is going to challenge that with you and me today by looking at what they did with their masks. You with me? All right, so we're going to start off here in Matthew 23, verse 1. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples. Now, by the way, he's talking past the disciples. Right? He's talking to the religious leaders standing in the back, but he's addressing his followers first. He says, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. They make the rules. Therefore, do whatever they teach you and follow it. So he says, I don't have a problem with the rules necessarily. I mean, they're trying to follow God's commands. They're trying to obey what God taught. But, he says, do not do as they do, for they do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on the shoulders of others. But they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. They're putting all this baggage on people. They're not helping. See, it is one thing to be right, to have the right information, the right law, the right command, the right stuff. But when you're not helping anybody, what's the point? So they're not even doing it themselves. They're saying, here, eat green eggs and ham, but I'm not going to have any of it. They're making rules, but not helping them be better people, helping them be the people that God wants them to be. It's one thing to teach. It's something else to help. It's one thing to point out someone's fault. It's something else to help them with it. It's one thing to see a splinter in someone else's eye. Another to take the log out of your own. Jesus said that too. So the first thing about hypocrisy is, are we in it to help other people or to be right? It's one thing to be right about what you believe. Another to be righteous in how you live and your actions toward other people. Then Jesus then turns from talking to his disciples to talking to their leaders themselves. Because I think he cares about them too. He says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you lock people out of the kingdom of heaven, for you do not go in yourselves, and when others are going in, you stop them. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you cross sea and land to make a single convert. And I'll stop there for a second. That's a big deal. I mean, they're going to travel and spend money and work hard for just one person. Is that admirable? Yeah. I mean, they really are. They'll travel land and sea for one convert. But then he says, and when you make the new convert, twice as much a child of hell as yourself. Why? Because their motivation's wrong. They don't care about the person. It's better they did nothing at all. But they're doing it for themselves, not for the person they're trying to reach. What drives us? What drives you? Why do we serve Jesus? Why do we follow Jesus today? Do we care about the folks out there who aren't here yet? Folks outside of this room? Do we care about being right or being righteous for the sake of other people? You're thinking, man, this is pretty harsh, Jesus. I mean, he's all over these guys. Woe to you, hypocrites. Like, Jesus, how do you really feel? It's like, I'll tell you. And he goes on. Next verse. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. For you tithe, you give 10% of your mint, dill, and cumin, but have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. It is these you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and of the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup so that the outside may become clean. So you also, on the outside, look righteous to others, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. So what do you think Jesus' view of hypocrisy is? Pretty harsh, right? He's pretty serious about this kind of stuff. Here's the cool thing about this, though, as hard as this is to hear, our interior brokenness, our sinfulness is not the problem, is it? Our interior brokenness, our interior baggage isn't the problem. When we pray, God have mercy on me, a sinner, Jesus says, you know what? I got something to work with now. I can work with that because you're being honest. There's no mask in all that. But it's our masks that cause the problem. Kierkegaard said this, do you not know that there comes a midnight hour when everyone has to throw off his mask? Jesus loves you as you are, not as you should be. He loves you as you are today, not as you should be. So we need to be honest and real. He can deal with that. Don't try to fake it till you make it. Be honest with who you are and your baggage and our sinfulness, because he can deal with that. He wants to deal with that. And the world watches that too. They see if we're being real and authentic or if we're being fake. They can see through that. That's what turns them off. Are we willing to eat our own green eggs and ham for ourselves? So if you're here today carrying some baggage like that, you've ever said those words about hypocrisy, or you know friends who do, I'll give you 2 words of encouragement. And the first is this. Jesus is as disgusted with hypocrisy as you are. He is. We just heard it. He's as disgusted with hypocrisy as you are. And if you don't like hypocrisy, that tells me that you want to be real and you want to be authentic. You want to be honest and true. Well, so does Jesus. That's who he is. So be encouraged by that. But also, be careful about the judgments you make about a single Christian or even a single church. I mean, yeah, I know we've had bad experiences in the past. Probably most of us have at some point. But remember, Jesus stands against hypocrisy too. He does. And at the same time, don't throw the baby with the bathwater. For example, let's say you go to a restaurant for lunch. You go there, and there's an hour wait. And when you get seated, there's no waiter. And then the food's cold, and it's dry, and your water never gets filled, and you get overcharged. It's just horrible, horrible experience. When you're done, you probably won't go back to that restaurant, will you? But are you going to say to yourself, okay, no more restaurants for me ever. I'm going to no restaurants. In fact, you know what? No more food. I'll never eat again. You're not going to say that, right? It doesn't make sense. But a lot of folks apply the same logic to the church or to Christians. It's not fair. Right? You be open to the fact that your problem isn't with Jesus because he's on your side. And the second thing is this. The church is a human and a divine institution by design. Jesus made it this way. He put humans and himself together and formed this thing we call the church. And when beauty breaks through our brokenness, it's incredible. And it happens a lot. When we see God working through humans, us, his people, his followers, it's world-changing. We need to focus on that too. Christians around the world continue to provide schooling for children, food and debt relief. They've designed programs to deal with addiction. Of the 138 universities that were started in America, 128 of those, 138, were started by Christians. They've founded a majority of the world's hospitals. And today is the single greatest provider of health care among the poorest places on earth are done by Christians. Folks you saw up here a minute ago who are going to Haiti are going there because they love Jesus and want to share that with other people. Christians continue to do that work, and they do it because they love Jesus. So throughout the generations, we do have a lot to apologize for as a church. We do. There's a lot of bad history, but also a lot of great history too, and a lot of great things going on. I don't know if you knew this, but back in the 3rd century, so about 250 AD, there was a huge epidemic in Rome. Now, during this time, Christians were persecuted. I mean, they were on the bottom of the food chain, right? No one liked them. They were outcast. They were abused, persecuted. During that time, though, this epidemic hit Rome. And it was said during this epidemic that about 5,000 people died a day in the empire. 5,000. In one city, Alexandria, it was getting pretty bad, and what happened was miraculous because the Christians stayed. The church saw this as an opportunity to show how much they loved people, how much God loved them. And they stayed, and they provided food, they provided burial, they provided just a caring place to wash off people who were ill and to give them a place to sleep. And they stayed at their own personal risk of getting the disease themselves. They stayed and cared for the dying. And it changed a lot of people's hearts because of the love that they showed. In fact, the Emperor Julian said that he wanted to mimic this Christian welfare system because it was so powerful. But you know what? It didn't work because the Christians did it out of love, not duty. The followers of Jesus, instead of fleeing from disease and death, they ministered to the sick and the poor and the widowed, the orphaned, and the crippled. The Roman Empire saw this and said things like this: look how they love one another. And that demonstration of love and compassion, despite being the abused and the outcast, it changed the face of the empire. I think Brad Paisley was right. He said at the end of that song, you know what's funny? As much as I'm baffled by it all, if I really needed help, well, you know who I'd call? Those crazy Christians. Well, I'm glad to be one of them. Let's pray together.